Every genre of storytelling has its cliches. And yes, that includes history. You've got your plot armored conquerors like Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan, big budget battles that decide the fate of nations, and stories that sound much more like ancient blockbusters than real life. But there's one historical trope that deserves more spotlight: migration. And not just any migration. Today, we're talking about the Bantu migration, a slow burning epic that unfolded over 3,000 years and reshaped the face of Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa. This wasn't just a people on the move, it was a rolling wave of innovation, language, farming, and culture that still echoes through the continent today. The Bantus likely began at the juncture of present day Eastern Nigeria and Western Cameroon. These societies were not yet building empires, but they were already masters of agriculture, growing millets, dry rice, and melons on a subsistence level. More importantly, they had mastered iron smelting, creating tools for farming, and when the need arose, weapons for warfare. Now, why did they move? Historians toss around explanations like famine, disease, and even wars of succession. Whatever the cause may be, what followed was one of the most magnificent and important migrations in human history. There were two great migration streams: the western stream along the Atlantic coast, which had reached Angola by 500 BC. The eastern stream is thought to have followed the Ubangi River, stopping west of Lake Victoria prior to branching off, one arm looping back west and another spreading south into modern day South Africa by 300 CE. During their migrations, the Bantu speaking peoples encountered an astounding diversity of cultures. In Central Africa, the Batwa, pygmy hunter gatherers, whose descendants still exist today in small groups. In the south, Khoisan hunter gatherers, famous for their click languages and ancient ancestry in the Kalahari. In the east, Cushitic herders, Khoisan and Nilo Saharan pastoralists, connected to modern day South Sudan. Instead of displacing these peoples, the Bantus constantly instead of displacing these peoples, the Bantus consistently intermarried and exchanged ideas with them. In the end, their languages and traditions won out. Over 350 million people today speak at least one of the 500 plus Bantu languages, including Zulu, Shona, Lingala, and Swana. Let's skip forward to one of the lesser known African states, perfect for a called little known history. In the rainforests of what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Kingdom of Luba began to form around 1300 CE. It truly blossomed in the 1400s and lasted until the 1800s when colonialists, Belgium, arrived and spoiled the fun. Their first king, in an ironic twist, was called Congolo, meaning rainbow. Although he was, well, a completely terrible king, he was intervened upon by a hunter named Kalala Ilunga, who married Congolo's sisters and outright deposed him, or gave his son the army to do it. However it happened, the story ends with a heroic new dynasty founded through courage, cleverness, and a little royal intrigue. The Luba kings were not just rulers, they were believed to have divine power, or bulupwe, through bloodlines. Their leadership was efficient and structured. Heads of villages answered to regional leaders who took direction from the king. The real power behind the throne? The Bambudye, influential secret societies that counseled the king and guarded sacred knowledge. The Luba economy thrived on copper and iron craftsmanship, driving trade as distant as Zimbabwe and the Indian Ocean. Currency itself evolved over the years, from copper ingots to glass beads imported from overseas, a sign of how well integrated they were into the international trade. Art, religion, and politics were all inextricably linked. Metal face masks with cattle horns, ritual scarring, and tall headdresses all signified elite identity and divine power. Now let's travel to the Atlantic coast, where in the late 1300s, the Kingdom of Congo grew up. Its capital, Mbanza, was situated on a fertile plateau and developed into a political and trade center. At its height, Congo ruled over 2 million subjects and traded in ivory, copper, salt, and yes, the tightly controlled slave trade. Congo kings, or the Nkani, ruled with a fist of iron. They appointed governors, required tributes, usually in the form of things like millet and palm wine, and gave enormous feasts to keep everyone in line, with a side of beer, of course. A single royal title, Nzambi Mhungu, or Supreme Creator, emphasized the king's religious function. He was not sacred, like Luba kings, but a divine appointee, frequently consolidated through marriage alliances with powerful priestly families. That all changed when the Portuguese arrived in the late 1400s. Congo's rulers converted to Christianity, and King Afonso I even made it the official state religion. Churches popped up, and they renamed the capital Sao Salvador. But things took a turn for the worse when the Portuguese got greedy, taking slaves, sticking their noses into politics, and raiding the locals. By the 1600s, things fell apart. The Battle of Mbuila in 1665 shattered Congo's leadership, and the kingdom splintered, ultimately becoming a part of Portuguese Angola by the 20th century. Now, if you want monuments, look no further than Great Zimbabwe, the heart of the Shona speaking Kingdom of Zimbabwe from about 1100 to 1550 CE. Large stone enclosures, some over 9 meters high, were built without mortar and still stand today. The great enclosure and hill complex likely served as royal palaces, spiritual centers, or elite storage for grain and valuables. Zimbabwe was rich in gold, which was mined from riverbeds and surface deposits and exchanged along the Swahili coast for luxury goods like Persian faience and Ming porcelain. The elite tightly managed trade. Society was patriarchal, and status was shown in the form of cattle ownership and wives. Chiefs ruled by consensus instead of by conquest, and boys underwent severe initiation rites to become leaders. Why did Great Zimbabwe collapse? Maybe the gold ran out, maybe the forests were cut down, maybe drought hit hard. Whatever the reason, the Shona moved north to form the Mutapa Kingdom, and Great Zimbabwe was left to its abandonment. Its greatness, European colonizers later said Africans weren't capable of having built it, but modern archaeology proves them wrong. Now, let's sail east along the Swahili coast, a chain of glittering city-states from Somalia south to Mozambique, where African, Arab, and Indian Ocean cultures met. The star that shone brightest, Kilwa Kisiwani. On an island, this wealth built coral stone mosques, palaces, and a cosmopolitan culture that drew upon African roots, Islamic law, Arabic language, and Persian influence. The Swahili language itself is of Bantu origin, but heavily influenced by Arabic, potent symbol of global connection. Kilwa was at its height from the 1200s to the 1400s, but when the Portuguese came in the late 15th century, they fought their way through the region to dominate Indian Ocean trade. Still, the legacy of the Swahili civilization lives on in the language, architecture, and ethos of the East African. From rainforests to rivers, mountains to mosques, the story of the Bantu migrations is a weave of connections, adaptations, and lasting legacies. The Luba ruled through ritual and knowledge. The Congolese brokered tradition and world religion. Great Zimbabwe dazzled with stone and gold. Kilwa placed Africa in a global conversation through trade and culture. These weren't isolated stories. They were part of a continental network driven by Bantu-speaking peoples who reshaped half of Africa. Their influence lives on in the languages, customs, and communities that still thrive today. So next time someone says African history is just tribes and deserts, hit them with this. Actually, it's palaces, secret societies, empires, and global trade routes. Welcome to Little Known History, where the past isn't merely potent, it's personal.